All right, this is Genesis chapter 24. The Olens are starting to read.
And how many verses each?
5 verses each.
All right. Now Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. So Abraham said to this oldest servant of his house, who ruled over all that he had, "Please put your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell. But you shall go to my country and to my family and take a wife for my son Isaac." And the servant said to him, "Perhaps the woman will not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I take your son back to the land from which you came?"
Make sure then that you do not take my son back there, Abraham said. "The Lord, the God of heaven, who brought me out of my father's household and my native land, and who spoke to me and promised on my oath, saying, 'To your offspring I will give you this land,' he will send there. If the woman is unwilling to come back, do not take my son back there." So the servant put one of his master's camels, loaded with all kinds of goods from his master. He set off for Aram Naharaim and made his way to the town of Nahor.
All right.
And he made his camel kneel down outside the city by a wall of water at evening time, the time when women go out to draw. "My master Abraham, please, my master Abraham, behold, of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now let it be that the young woman to whom I say, 'Please, let down your pitcher that I may drink,' and she says, 'Drink, and I will also give your camels a drink.' Let her be the one you have appointed for your servant Isaac, and by this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master." And it happened before he had finished speaking that behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, son of brother, came out with her pitcher on her shoulder.
All right. Go ahead, Julia.
Rebecca was very beautiful and old enough to be married, but she was still a virgin. She went down to the spring, filled her jug, and came up again. Running over to her, the servant said, "Please give me a little drink of water from your jug." "Yes, my lord," she answered, "have a drink." And she quickly lowered her jug from her shoulder and gave him a drink. When she had given him a drink, she said, "I'll draw water for your camels too, until they have had enough to drink." So she quickly emptied her jug into the watering trough and ran back to the well to draw water for all the camels.
All right, Sherry.
The servant watched her in silence, wondering whether or not the Lord had given him success in his mission. Then at last, when the camels had finished drinking, he took out a gold ring for her nose and 2 large gold bracelets for her wrists. "Whose daughter are you?" he asked. "And please tell me, would your father have any room to put us up for the night?" "I am the daughter of Bethuel," she replied. "My grandparents are Nahor and Milcah. Yes, we have plenty of straw and feed for the camels, and we have room for guests."
All right. Back to the Olens.
The man bowed low and worshiped the Lord. "Praise the Lord, the God of my master Abraham," he said. "The Lord has shown unfailing love and faithfulness to my master, for he has led me straight to my master's relatives." The young woman ran home to tell her family everything that had happened. Now Rebekah had a brother named Laban, who ran out to meet the man at the spring. He had seen the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists, and had heard Rebekah tell what the man had said. So he rushed out to the spring where the man was still standing beside his camels.
Come, you who are blessed by the Lord, he said. Why are you standing here? I have prepared the house and places for your camels. So the man went to the house, and the camels were unloaded. Straw and fodder were brought for the camels, and water for him and his men to wash their feet. Then food was set before him, but he said, I will not eat until I have told you what I must say. Then tell us, said Laban. So he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has blessed my master abundantly, and he has become wealthy. He has given him sheep and cattle, silver and gold, male and female servants, and camels and donkeys.
And Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master, when she was old, and to him he has given all that he has. Now my master made me swear, saying, you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I dwell, but you shall go to my father's house and to my family and take a wife for my son. And I said to my master, perhaps the woman will not follow me. But he said to me, the Lord before whom I walk will send his angel with you and prosper your way. And you shall take a wife for my son from my family and from my father's house.
All right. Julia again.
Then you will have fulfilled your obligation. But if you go to my relatives and they refuse to let her go with you, you will be free from my oath. So today, when I came to the spring, I prayed this prayer. O Lord, God of my master Abraham, please give me success on this mission. See, I am standing here beside this spring. This is my request. When a young woman comes to draw water, I will say to her, please give me a little drink of water from your jug. If she says yes, have a drink, and I will draw water for your camels too. Let her be the one you have selected to be the wife of my master's son. Before I had finished praying in my heart, I saw Rebekah coming out with her water jug on her shoulder. She went down to the spring and drew water. So I said to her, please give me a drink.
All right. Sherry.
She quickly lowered her jug from her shoulder and said, yes, have a drink, and I will water your camels too. So I drank, and then she watered the camels. Then I asked, whose daughter are you? She replied, I am the daughter of Bethuel, and my grandparents are Nahor and Milcah. So I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists. Then I bowed low and worshiped the Lord. I praised the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, because he had led me straight to my master's niece to be his son's wife. So tell me, will you or won't you show unfailing love and faithfulness to my master? Please tell me yes or no, and then I'll know what to do next. Then Laban and Bethuel replied, the Lord has obviously brought you here, so there is nothing we can say.
All right. The Olins, why don't you finish it up, please?
All right. Here is Rebekah. Take her and go. Yes, let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has directed. When Abraham's servant heard their answer, he bowed down to the ground and worshiped the Lord. Then he brought out silver and gold jewelry and clothing and presented them to Rebekah. He also gave expensive presents to her brother and mother. Then they ate their meal, and the servant and the men with them, stayed there overnight. But early next morning, Abraham's servant said, send me back to my master. But we want Rebekah to stay with us at least 10 days. Her brother and mother said, then she can go.
But he said to them, do not detain me now that the Lord has granted success to my journey. Send me on my way so I may go to my master. Then they said, let's call the young woman and ask her about it. So they called Rebekah and asked her, will you go with this man? I will go, she said. So they sent their sister Rebekah on her way, along with her nurse and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, our sister, may you increase to thousands upon thousands. May your offspring possess the cities of their enemies.
Then Rebekah and her maids arose, and they rode on the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. Now Isaac came from the way of Beer Lahai for he dwelt in the south. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field in the evening, and he lifted up his eyes and looked, and there the camels were coming. Then Rebekah lifted her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from her camel. For she said to the servant, "Who is this man walking in the field to meet us?" The servant says, "It is my master." So she took a veil and covered herself, and the servant told Isaac all the things he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death.
All right. Anything stand out in this chapter,
A lot stands out.
right? In verse 2, what do you think it meant to have Eliezer put his hand to put his hand under Abraham's thigh? That's a weird place to put your hand in for an oath. Why do you think he asked him to put it there?
I've never really understood that either, because doesn't Jacob ask the same thing with Joseph and all that too? So it must be something traditional.
Right. Well, this is the thing. The groin is actually the most important part of a man, only because it is part of creating heirs. It is also known for fruitfulness. And so in their minds, when God commands them to be fruitful and multiply, that is the most important part of a man. And so it's either the loins, when you look at some other people who are, anytime they want to make a really important oath, that's where they're going to go. Even when Song of Solomon, in expressing her love, he talks about, his loins doing stuff. And again, it's all about, the most important part for them is that. And so Abraham wanted to make sure that this really important command that he was giving to his most trusted servant, that is put there. It's not even just any ordinary servant. And we know that Abraham at least has almost like over 300 soldiers. I mean, if that's how many soldiers he has, then we can only imagine how many servants he has. But out of all his servants, this is his most trusted one. And someday I'd love to know why. What is it about Eliezer that makes him so trustworthy? But it seems like it's because he's so obedient. It's like he understands the importance of this command.
Well, I think later on he seems pretty wise too. I mean, if you're thinking about qualifications for your master's son, wouldn't one of the best qualifications would be thinking of others? When he says, well, not only will she give me a drink, that's one thing, to be really nice to me, but to even go out of her way without even being asked to feed my kid, to water my camels too. That's a very generous person who's willing to serve. And so I think that would be a pretty good characteristic for a wife.
Right. And even when these guys are looking for the best possible spouse for Isaac, did you notice at least two, maybe even three? The third one is a little hidden, but at least two things that they were looking for.
I'm not sure where you're going, but are you saying like it couldn't be from the Canaanites? It had to be
Right.
from their family back home.
Right. And this, by the way, goes back to Noah.
Mm.
It seems to me that there was a reason. Now, before, I thought it was only because, at least their family, let's keep it within the family. But it was so much deeper than that. And part of it is because there was a curse put on Canaan. And I know for me, this is where it seems to me that God, in his incredible ways, even though the curse was put on Canaan, he was sending Abraham to be a blessing to the Canaanites. So it seems to me that God, even after giving the curse to Canaan, just goes right back and say, look, I got to give you a second chance. I got to give your generation a second chance. But Abraham wanted to make sure that the wife will not come from the cursed. It has to come from his family, which comes from the lineage of Shem, the Semites. And so here we actually have one aspect of looking for a good mate, and that is make sure that they come from a lineage of people who are blessed by God. And we could even say that obviously they serve or they worship God, because when Eliezer started talking about his sign from God, every one of them said, that makes a lot of sense, and only people who actually worship God would even say that. There's this other thing that I thought was pretty important. Hey, Don.
Boy, oh boy.
Hi,
I
Don.
I got a cold.
Oh,
So
no.
Uh-oh.
after supper, I've laid down. I didn't wake up enough time.
Well, I'm so glad you decided to come anyway, man. Yeah, we're just discussing Genesis 24. We're done reading it. And the question we're answering at this point is there are two areas that Abraham wanted to make sure that his son, two characteristics of the wife that Eliezer was trying to pick for his son. The first one is it has to come from his family, which is the descendants of Shem, the Semites, and not from Canaan. And we were just talking about how that's because the Canaanites were cursed all the way back to Noah. And then there's a second aspect of it, and maybe even a third. And I was asking the question, what was the second one?
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, I don't know if this is part of it, but Eliezer even said, well, can I take the boy with me? Can I take him back? And Abraham's like, no. The whole point of God was to get us away from there to a land that he promised us. So I don't know if that's the other one or.
Yeah, it is. Those are two, and if you find something else, that please share it. But those are the two really important ones for me. Why do you think that was important to Abraham?
Well, he was the promised son. He was the one that God had promised to him to be the leader of a new nation, and the land of Canaan was the area where he was supposed to reign, or where this was to come out of.
Yeah, and I know for me, for those two, if I'm talking to anyone who's like, hey, I'm trying to look for a spouse, well, where should I find, what characteristic should I find? I think with these two, For me, some of the things that are pretty evident is, first of all, you need to find someone who is worshiping the same God you are. And I say that because there's so many people who says, oh yeah, I believe in God, but they don't worship him, or they don't. Believing, I think, is the English word that's very different than believing the Hebrew word, or believing in even the Greek, because believing in Hebrew and Greek really talks a lot more about following. Somebody who believes is not somebody who just believes mentally, but is actually following, following God. And so that would be the first. And the second is, you need to find somebody who's going to agree with your purpose in life. You can disagree about a lot of things, whether you like Mexican food or not, or whether you like the Sox or the Cubs. I mean, those, I think, for some people, those are really important stuff. But it seems to me here that Abraham knew that if Isaac is going to fulfill the purpose that God has for him, he needs to find someone who agrees with that purpose, who would actually stand beside him and says, you know what, I'll give my life to that purpose as well. And that is why, Abraham didn't say, make sure she's beautiful, make sure she comes from a rich family, make sure she has a good career. None of that. It's basically, he says, look, make sure he comes from this place. He comes from these descendants, because these descendants would have a much better chance of serving God. And number two, make sure she's willing to get out of there and come here. Because he didn't even care, how that person looks, how old she was, or anything like that. She just says, if this person has those qualities, then it's God who has chosen. What do you guys think about that? That almost seems like it narrows down, the choices. And I know for me, many times people would be saying, you know what, whether it be choosing an Adventist or choosing a Christian, it just, in my mind, usually when I counsel couples who are about to get married, I tell them, look, if your purpose is not to, follow God, don't pick somebody who is passionate about God, or vice versa. If you're passionate about God, don't pick anyone who isn't passionate about God, because there will come a time when it will separate you. And I think, for me, one of the neatest things about this story, that when it comes to picking someone, is this, to me, shows how you put God in the mix. This is how you're saying, okay, God, my life is yours. If you want me to marry, then you're going to have to pick someone for me. And anyone who tells me things like, you know what, you're narrowing. If all I'm going to do is pick from a church, or if all I'm going to pick from are Adventists, or even faithful Adventists, because that narrows down even more, then what I tell them is, look, you only really need to find one. Usually that's a good thing. You don't need to find 2 or 5. You only need to find one. And when you find the right one, just like Eliezer did then really it doesn't matter, the other 500 or so that you would have on this pool that you can choose from. And it seems to me that Abraham wanted God to be part of this whole process. And the way you have God in the process is when you know God's purpose for your life, when you know what God wants you to do with your life, and then you pick someone who says, I agree with that. Not only do I agree with that, I will support it wholeheartedly. What do you guys think about that?
I think that that's a good thing. I mean, you need to have someone in the same sphere of influence and understanding as what you are as far as your biblical. Otherwise, you're going to have conflicts in the home.
There are conflicts.
And it's true. By the way, whether you find somebody who is a follower of God or there always will be conflicts. Some of those conflicts are really intense. But the one thing that I can say from experience, because, you know, I know that Gladys and I are pretty open about our conflicts. But there's the one thing we totally agree on is who God is in our lives and how important he is. And that when it comes to how we spend our money, we totally disagree on a whole lot of things on how to spend our money, but spending money on God, that's not even, that's not even an argument. Going to church, never once have we had an argument of, no, you should not go to church today or something like that. That's just not, that's not even the sphere of one of the things we argue about. And many times we've struggled with even things of God calling us for something. But I know I've now trusted God to say, all right, Lord, you convince me. Now you got to convince Gladys, because, this is not going to be a one person ministry, or this isn't going to be things like that. And I'm trusting God with that, only because I know that Gladys also talks with God, that God's will is also very important to Gladys. And so for me, yeah, we have so many things that we totally disagree with, but that's the one thing that kind of keeps us going. And yeah, I think when people ask me, because a lot of people ask me about things like this, especially teenagers, where they're like, I can't find anyone in church because, I grew up with these people and they're like brothers and sisters to me, that type of a thing. Or people are like, I can't find anyone here that I'm attracted to, but I find a lot of people I'm attracted to who isn't part of this church. And I'm like, well, you need to make a choice, just like Abraham did. And this is where Abraham's faith was. He had no idea about Rebecca. All he knew is if that God sent him there, then God would also provide his son, someone who would carry on their calling to be a blessing in Canaan. He didn't know what that meant. He didn't know how that was happening, but he had faith that God would do it. And I think what's interesting is, so did Isaac. Just like Isaac was willing to be sacrificed, he was like, okay, Dad, I understand that's culture, but I think it's so much deeper than that. Because it seems to me that when we trust God with our future, God would actually choose someone that would help us achieve the future he wants for us. Any other comments or questions on that part of it?
Do we know much about Eliezer? Where did he come from? I mean, was he from the same area that Abraham was, or how long was he his servant?
No, I don't know. Although, Sherry might do something with this because she found a whole lot of stuff on Onesiphorus, and I'm like, I can't. I only heard him twice. There's only 2 places in the Bible that has him, and somehow Sherry did a whole sermon on him. So who knows? Let's get Sherry on this.
All right, I'm on it.
There you go. But no, I really don't know.
Well, the only reason I ask is because obviously he believes in God because he prayed to God and then he praised God when he answered his prayer. But he always referred to God as my master's God. So I just didn't know whether he was a foreigner or whether he was, it was just kind of strange that he would address it as, well, not necessarily strange, but that he would address it as his master's God. So I just was wondering.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure one of the things that is cultural back then is once you are a servant to somebody, then everything you own is theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guessing when he talks about God, he talks about the God that Abraham introduced to him.
Right.
And I know in the Old Testament, God is always the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In fact, in the New Testament, it's also that way.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's true.
I find it very interesting that he wanted him to go back to his family, and she ends up marrying one of his brother's kids. And yet today we wouldn't have that happen.
Because he's marrying a cousin or something.
Right.
But that
Right.
was common back. I mean, even Abraham's wife, Sarah, was like a half sister.
But is that part of why we degraded down some? When you think of genealogy and stuff, and that's historical.
yeah, it could be, but I do think that I know God's plan seems to be everybody comes from Adam and Eve. So I don't know how that would look like without sin, but I guess even without sin, it would have some of it have to be brothers and sisters. And I think sin just added something to that uh, actually made humanity weaker.
Mm.
And so my answer to that is yes.
And I also found it interesting that in the study of it, Isaac goes into his mother's tent, and Abraham has not married till after Isaac has a wife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems to me that Abraham really took God's commands seriously. So much so that, again, I've seen parents who cared more for themselves, their future, than their kids' future. I know a guy who decided to take his master's at the cost of his kids going to college.
Mm.
And really, the kids got all mad and stuff. And for me, it was also infuriating because it seems to me that, again, somebody would put themselves over their kids, so to speak. And I see that way too much. But Abraham didn't seem to do that. He understood that the future was with Isaac and not with him. And he wanted to make sure the future was safe before he was safe. I only wish that most churches have that same mentality. Let's take care of our kids first, because they are the future. If if they're not on the same track we are, then whatever we did before might not matter. I think for Abraham, that was really true. This really brings that up, you know.
It's very common nowadays that the kids, like parents will buy their cigarettes or their alcohol before their child will have a lunch or milk money, or it's very common. Very
Right.
sad.
Yeah. I mean, I get goosebumps just hearing it, because yeah, it's very, very sad.
It is.
And this is the other thing that is so neat about Rebecca. You have to ask, for me, I'm asking the question, what would make a young lady go to a place that she knows no one? You know, go leave her family to go marry a guy he's never met. You know, who knows what's there? But it seems to me, when Rebecca heard the story of how God did all of these things for Abraham, and how Eliezer asked God, and somehow he acted according to the prayer, you begin to see again where Rebecca's heart is. You know,
Well, not only in making that decision, but in doing it less than 24 hours. She was gone. I mean, it's like, whoa, you know, that was pretty fast.
yeah,
I think it's interesting too, culturally, like she wouldn't have had a say. Like, it would have, yeah, you're marrying this guy. Okay, well, like that's it. But they even like, it's actually interesting that they consulted her, when they said, will you leave right away? They're like, well, let's ask Rebecca. And it's Rebecca's decision to say, yep, we'll leave right now. Like, let's not delay this, so she must have had a relationship with God, or at least felt convicted enough that this was what she was supposed to do. But it's really rare that a woman would have been consulted in that at this time.
right.
So the fact that the decision was made for her, she could have potentially backed out, yet she totally went for it.
Yeah, because verse 55, the mom and uncle said, look, we want Rebecca to stay with us 10 days.
Right.
And Eliezer's like, nah, sorry, I can't stay 10 days. I don't know why. See, these are some of the details I would love to know. What was the rush, and I love the fact, like what you brought, Hannah, that they asked her and she said, yeah, I'll go. I would think that she would have said, yeah, 10 days, please. Let me just rethink this. Let me pack or something.
Well,
She must have been a very practical person.
Yeah.
Didn't she have time to pack? They brought silver and gold. Let's see. I was kind of reading reading the whole chapter while we were talking.
Mhm.
Well,
it looks like she had help,
yes.
right? We have no idea how many maids she brought with her, but it seems like she had help.
Yes.
So she at least had somebody familiar around her.
Yes.
Right.
That's right. And maybe it was a tradition in, since they were given away in marriage, it wasn't really their decision, that the Lord was working with Rebecca, that since this was a family member, could she have known about, was it Isaac? That's who she was going to marry. Was it Isaac?
Could she have known? Could Rebecca have known?
Could the family, could she have known the whole family,
Um,
even if they
yeah,
didn't live there?
I think she would have heard about him. She would have heard about Abraham, but they haven't seen each other. I would think Abraham left. I think he was 60, and now he was 100, at least 120. So 60 years, at least 60, went from when he left to now. So yeah,
Would she have known, would she have known the family, Abraham's family? Possibly.
yeah. He would. I think Nahor, because I think Laban is an uncle.
Yes.
I need to try to figure out where in the lineage it was, but obviously, um, Laban's
Wouldn't he have been
dad. I'm sorry.
Wouldn't he have been a cousin? Because he would have been somewhere around the same age as Isaac, maybe a little older,
Right.
because they eventually became brother-in-laws. So
Right. Yeah, I forgot which chapter it was, but the author, I mean, Moses actually told us which lineage Laban came from and which lineage Rebecca came from. And yeah, there definitely was kinship there. And so at some point they would talk about somebody passed down this story from generation to generation. Because I know Moses knew about this story because it's also been passed down to him. And that's the thing about Jews is they are so they're a real stickler to genealogy.
Mm.
And that is why it is so important in the Old Testament, especially the Pentateuch, that the genealogy is mentioned, because they need to know that you're purebred and not just, they're purebred Semites, purebred Canaanites, or whatever, things like that. That seems to be really important to them back then.
Well, I know this is jumping ahead, but it's interesting that, and when you think about it, he was so concerned with Isaac, but then he marries someone from Canaan.
You mean
Abraham?
Abraham?
Chapter, he marries someone from Canaan and doesn't let their kids stay around Isaac.
Yeah. Now, since you jumped ahead, let me jump ahead too.
You just started a trend, Cherry.
To me, it's like, if he was so particular with Isaac, why wouldn't he have been even particular with himself?
Well, this is the thing. Some Jewish scholars, now I'm just going to go with them, because it has come down that some rabbis have talked about Keturah. Keturah was the one he married. That they're saying that Keturah was really Hagar.
Mm-hmm.
And so marrying Hagar was righting a wrong. It was him going, yeah, because it seems to me that the reason why seems accurate, and again, just going with what they're saying, is that Isaac and Ishmael buried Abraham,
Mm-hmm.
and then also buried Sarah. So it seems to me that at the end, the brothers who, got angry at each other at some point, made up, so that even though Abraham totally still favored Isaac, that he remarried, maybe not remarry, but he made Keturah go from concubine to wife. If Keturah is really Hagar, then, for him, he wanted to honor her that way, and somehow had like 5 sons with Keturah. And so I don't know if that's an excuse, but it's one of those things where if that was true, then it wasn't like he was going against what he was telling Isaac. It was just he was trying to right a wrong. All right. Anything else? Yeah, we spent a little longer on this because it is almost 70 verses. So and there's a lot of really interesting things on this. If there's nothing else though, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you for joining us at our prayer and Bible study session as we journey through the Bible one chapter at a time. We realize that you might have some questions or comments on the things that we discussed today. And if you do, please feel free to fill out the form below. Also, if you would like to have your own Bible, please fill out the form below and we will get back to you as soon as we possibly can. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next time at our prayer and Bible study session.